views, etc., etc. Well, David Icke is here. David, hello.
Hello. If they had a brain, they'd be dangerous, really. I mean, we've just seen just how easy it is to get anyone to believe anything. My books, if you read The Biggest Secret, actually say that people who claim this is a Jewish plot are completely mistaken because it's actually not.
Yeah.
I also go deeply into the fact that the Nazis in Germany were fundamentally involved in this. And if you've read the book, you'll know it, of course.
I've read the whole book.
And that they were puppets of this very manipulation. And just let's just talk about one thing here, Mrs. Bethlehem. Just get your mind round this for a second. When you mention, as I do and many other people do, that the Rothschild banking family are fundamentally involved and have been since for centuries, they say, oh, he's anti-Semitic. Well, on my last visit to South Africa, I was invited to have a private meeting with P.W. Botha. I was speaking down near his place, and I spent an hour and a half with the guy. And he'd heard me talking about the fact that the world was manipulated, and he wanted to talk to me about how South Africa had been manipulated by people like Kissinger and Carrington, who, of course, are widely mentioned in all my books. And he said, the Rothschilds came up. And I said he said to me, I had an interesting meeting with the Rothschilds once, he said. I was invited, he said, with Pick Botha to host a meeting of the English Rothschilds in Cape Town during the 1980s. He said, and at that meeting, they said that there was wealth in Swiss bank accounts that used to belong to German Jews that would be available for investment in South Africa if they could agree the deal. Now, this is the very wealth, Mrs. Bethlehem, that has come to light in the last few years. The money that was stolen from German Jews who suffered under the Nazis. So I think we ought to open our minds a little bit wider if we're not going to be scammed for another few hundred years.
But let me come in here because we're giving you a platform to present your views. Now, some of it to me seems ludicrous, some of it is very thought-provoking. But I read the book, okay?
Yeah.
And we're going to go through some of the central points. But perhaps the danger is that not you, but other people latch on to certain areas of what you talk about. And I mean, there are reports, I checked on the media, where right-wing groups...
Must be true, then.
Right-wing groups are now folling you.
Nonsense.
You've become
Total
something
nonsense.
of a right-wing... And a lot of those right-wing people are anti-Semitic, anti-black, they're racist, etc.
This is absolute total nonsense. You see, there's two ways of stopping someone who is actually getting far too close to the truth. One is to assassinate them physically, which is not a very good idea once you get a reputation for this stuff, because it just gives massive credibility to it.
Right.
The other alternative, which has been used throughout history and is used more and more today, is to assassinate their character. So what you say is, we have to discredit this guy as a person, and in doing so, we will discredit what this guy's saying. So you start to say, hey, far right-wing groups are following him. Well, I'd like to actually see where these groups are, because I've never met them. And the whole book is actually pointing out that we are heading fast for a global version of Nazi Germany. So what you do is you take what someone said and you turn it on, or what someone is saying, and you turn it around and actually turn it against them and say, actually, you're far right. Well, that's a stunningly nonsensical statement for anyone who spent 5 minutes with me or spent 2 minutes reading my books. It's the fascist, centralized, controlled military dictatorships that we're heading into. And my books have been talking about this for years. And you look at Kosovo, you look at what NATO has become, which is basically a world police force. I predicted this was going to happen 5-6 years ago, that we were going to see these conflicts created, which NATO would be used to police, and would, by changing the status quo, by events, become the world police force. And that's what it's become. And we've seen nothing yet.
All right, David Icke, the one thing you keep mentioning, my books, my tapes. You read the book. When you read my previous book. And I look at this and I say, this David Icke, I mean, he's talented, he talks well, he makes these outlandish statements, but he's an industry. I mean, the more outlandish you get, the more money you make. Let's
Nonsense.
be honest. You're an industry.
No, the more.
There are T-shirts. You look on the internet. There are T-shirts. You buy books. You buy records. You buy tapes.
Excuse me. What friggin' T-shirts?
No T-shirts.
What do I want to make T-shirts for?
To make money. To make money. You're an industry.
What T-shirts? Tell me where the T-shirts are, and tell me what's on them, and tell me where I can get them, because I'd be delighted, because there aren't any. Go on.
All right.
The floor is yours, John.
All right. Well, no, the radio station is mine for the moment. Tell me about the industry.
Where are these T-shirts?
Well, no, come on.
No, hold on, John. No, this is interesting, you see. This is interesting. Because, first of all, I'm a flipping right-wing whatever, you know, when I'm actually the opposite. And then, now I'm selling T-shirts. Now, the first thing is a nonsense. The T-shirts don't exist. I mean, what am I...
But you are an industry.
What am I going to be next?
You sell books, you sell tapes, you lecture. You're the same as the guy coming out here selling a new mousetrap, surely. It's an industry, and the more outlandish you get. I'm trying to decide, David, if you're bonkers. I'm trying to decide whether you're genuine, if you really believe what you say, and I'm trying to decide whether or not there's an element of truth in what you do. I'm Joe Public. I'm Joe Public.
Yeah, fine. And you know what my reaction to is that?
Well,
I couldn't care less, mate. I really couldn't care less what you think of me or what anyone in South Africa thinks of me. I'm a researcher. I'm a journalist doing proper journalism instead of pulling the official line off the tape machines and reading it and calling it news. And I'm trying to uncover what's really going on in the world. And I've got a lot of questions that I can't answer yet. I've got a lot of questions I'd like to see the answers to, because it's a journey. You don't uncover this in 5 minutes. And I'm just another step along the journey now. And that's all I'm doing. And if I am going to produce books, which I have to spend my own money printing, by the way, then actually I have to sell them for money. Otherwise, there's no more books. It's quite simple. And it's amazing that anyone else does that. They do something. They can go into the city of London and play the casino that causes mayhem throughout the third world just to make a few quid. And he's ever successful. Oh yeah, he's a stockbroker. He's ever so good, you know. Oh yeah, very credible man, him. And that you actually earn a living out of uncovering this stuff. And to be frank, if this was done part-time, then you might as well go and have a cup of tea or go down the bar or something. You're wasting your time.
You believe it all. You believe it all. You believe it all what you write.
No, what
I'm saying is everything here and the theories you put forward, and I understand you say you don't know everything, but you write this honestly. What you write it, because some of the stuff we're going to talk about now, which isn't in the publicity, which isn't on the cover, and you know what I'm talking about, you know what's coming, all right, is so outrageous.
Bring it on.
All right.
Bring it on.
But you believe all this. You believe all this.
No, what I do is I spend my life traveling around the world, talking to endless numbers of people in endless different walks of life, and then I go back home and I sit at my typewriter and I think, what shall I make up today? You know, of course I flippin' believe it. And a lot of the stuff in the book, I'm actually saying, not this is what is happening, but this is what endless people are experiencing in different parts of the world, from different walks of life, and they're actually describing the same phenomena. Now, if someone wants to explain to me what that phenomena is in a credible way, I will withdraw that book from circulation. But no one has. All
right, we're going to go into that in a moment. If you've got any questions, comments for David Icke, you're more than welcome to phone in. We're going to be talking to him. Later on, we'll be talking to somebody who's talking
Head. You're listening to some of 702's interview highlights from the past 7 days.
Invest some time with us, and you could be investing in 2 carefully selected JSE share portfolios. And there's the weekly jackpot, which stands at 1,000 Rand. The 702 JSE contest on the John Robbie Show every Wednesday morning. Time you can't afford not to invest in. Only on 702 Talk Radio.
This week in the Sunday Times. Angry farmer chops off laborer's head after losing court case. Business heavyweights go to war over 60 billion Rand cell phone giants. 5 million Rand facelift for Mbeki's official home. And the hunt for farmer who poured dung over a policewoman. The Sunday Times. The paper for the people who care.
Repent your sins, the end is nigh. The end of the world. The end of the world. Prepare to meet thy maker.
Guess guess what? The end wasn't nigh, and in celebration of us all surviving the total eclipse of the sun, you could win another Altazimuth telescope worth 7,000 Rand in the 702 Discovery Total Eclipse competition. Tune into the John Robbie Show this Wednesday and get an eyeful, courtesy of DSTV's Discovery Channel, the leader in real-world programming.
We're going to be talking to
Later on, we'll be talking to somebody who's talking
head. It's the talk of the week.
8:20, we're talking to David Icke. The lines are full. We'll take your calls now in a moment. Short and sharp and specific questions, please. What you say, David? Can you get the headphones on? They're the
wrong way around.
Oh, it's a conspiracy here. Hang on a second, Darius.
There's a conspiracy going on.
It's a conspiracy to keep you off here.
Actually, I'm surprised we've got this far into the show without you mentioning Man United. I was dreading it, really.
A conspiracy to get them out of the FA Cup.
That's
now,
right.
let's stick to what you've got. The conspiracy is there, the bloodlines, the great organizations. But this book, you go back and say it's related to aliens. There's an alien, lizard, reptile bloodline. Briefly explain what you mean and your evidence.
Briefly, crikey. Well, let's just do it in as brief summary as I can. When I wrote a book called And the Truth Shall Set You Free, which basically focusing on how the world's controlled today and the structures, it became very clear two things. First of all, the main people involved in it were obsessively interbreeding with each other. And I thought, well, what the heck is the obsession with genetics? Because it can't just be snobbery, surely. And the other thing was, it was very clear, given the structure by which the world is manipulated today, that this structure wasn't put together in 5 minutes or 5 decades. So I started to go back, as many people have, because this is not just me, we're talking thousands and thousands of people around the world coming up with some of this stuff. And eventually, after a heck of a lot of time and research, I got it back to the ancient world. I'm picking up this manipulation from places like Babylon and ancient Egypt and this kind of area. And as you go back into the ancient world, you scan the ancient accounts, you start to find amazing correlations and common themes of a race of beings from the stars, which were commonly known as the gods.
Yeah.
Who interbred with humanity thousands and thousands of years ago, creating a hybrid race. Now, this has even got into the Old Testament, where it talks about the sons of God who interbred with the daughters of men, creating a hybrid race called the Nephilim. Now, just to give you one example of these accounts, in 1850, an Englishman found thousands, tens of thousands, of clay tablets buried in what we now call Iraq. These were buried, it is estimated, around 2000 BC.
Sumerian tablets.
Yeah. And they tell the story. And there's been a number of books, not written from a conspiracy point of view, but purely translating them. In fact, there's been a lot in the last few years. And the common theme is that these tablets talk about a race of gods from another world, which the tablets call the Anunnaki, which apparently translates from the Sumerian as those who from heaven to earth came. And it talks about how they interbred with humanity, creating a hybrid race, and how, and let's just emphasize this, they were buried around 2000 BC and found in 1850, and how the first interbreeding was done by what we call today test tube methods. Test tube methods, 2000 BC and before. And it also talks about how this hybrid crossbreed race, which I think became known in Egypt as the demigods. They talk about the period of the gods and then the period of the demigods. How these hybrid bloodlines were put into the positions of ancient royal power in places like Egypt, Babylon, etc. And when you, and it's only in the last 3 weeks that I've come across some of this stuff. I've come across 3-4 separate genealogical sources who've been investigating the genealogy of the global families who were involved in control of finance, of politics, etc.
Right.
Including the 42 presidents of the United States. And one guy's been doing this for 26 years. And what have they done? And this is completely independent of my research, they have taken the key players in the manipulation of the world today that are mentioned in my books, back to these very royal ruling families of the ancient Near and Middle East, people like Ramesses II, one of the most, if not the most famous pharaoh of Egypt.
The builder, yeah.
Now, if you just alone, and this is without all the other meat on the bones, put those two things together, then things start to get very interesting indeed. You have the obsession with interbreeding, interbreeding only within their own bloodlines, and this happens not just in the royal families and the aristocracy of Europe. It also happens in the so-called Eastern Establishment families of the United States that produce the major people that run America, the people like the Rockefellers and the Mellons and what have you. And then you look at the genealogy of the 42 presidents of the United States. Now, people say, well, everyone goes back to nationwide. Yeah, of course, that's a good point. But there have been, now, this minute we're speaking, there are 260 million people in the United States.
Yeah.
Since 1776 and the Declaration of Independence, there have been hundreds and hundreds of millions of people living in America. 42 of those to Clinton, of those hundreds of millions have actually become president of the United States. You would think, John, with an open mind, that even statistically, there might be a little genetic diversity among the 42. Bit of a chance, what?
You're saying there isn't?
No, they're all related. The Bush, George Bush, for instance, the Bush family, goes back to Alexander the Great and these ancient families, the ruling families and stuff that I talked about. So do all the others. They're related to the House of Windsor. And who is the person now, and I've spent a lot of time in the States recently, who is being brought through to be the next president of the United States? The man who's just broken the record for money raising to run for the presidential candidature in the Republican Party. George W. Bush, the son of George Bush. Just another one, the 43rd.
So the line continues.
The line continues.
But let's go, because I want to go to the lines because people are phoning in. What you're basically saying is an alien race came, interbred with the humans, and their bloodline is continuing, is being selectively bred, and these people are the people who are running the Earth now.
Exactly.
That's basically it. And ultimately, they want to take over and they want to run the planet.
Well, this is another interesting point. You see, it's not that there is a plan to take the planet over. It's that it was taken over a long time ago. What we're looking at now is the dotting of the I's and the crossing of the T's through a structure which is clearly, for goodness sake, unfolding in front of our eyes, of global centralization of power in politics with a world government, in the military with a world army, NATO, with a world bank, a world currency. I mean, the whole thrust of the world is going like lightning towards that. In Europe now, we have this single currency, the euro, which is being prepared to become the currency of Europe. We have a single central bank in Frankfurt, where decisions are made by bankers and not by elected politicians. We have a situation in Europe now where national law is subordinate to law decided at the European level. We've started having control of and decision making in communities. Then it went to central government in the country. Now the central government has become just a subsidiary of the European government. We're only one step from world government, and that's what people have been suggesting that the agenda has been aiming for so long. We're seeing it.
Some people might say world government's a good thing. It's a good thing if you've got people there with checks and balances and running it. It'll do away with wars, it'll do away with poverty, it'll do away with starvation. What's wrong with it?
World government, as a coordinating body, which coordinates things that have relevance to all of us, is in itself not a bad thing. But we're not talking about a coordinating body. We're talking about a dictatorship. Just as we've got to the level in Europe now, where bureaucrats in Brussels dictate the policies of the countries of Europe, including interest rates, etc. So we're aiming to a situation where there will be a global level which dictates to the world, and it's not a theory. Oh, this might happen. It is happening in our face now.
We'll continue with David. David, I'll get your question. One thing I want to say, because one of the things you mentioned in your book is that symbolism and architecture and all this sort of thing are very, very important.
Right.
And I read this book and I said, David Icke has fallen out of the tree, right? And I saw on the television, I saw something about the euros. And you know what's on the euro note? Is there an arch? And you say this arch is symbolic, and you mention it of Freemasonry and Royal Arch Freemasonry, etc., etc. And I read your book, and then suddenly I saw a euro note, and they've got this architectural arch on the euro. Now, that's the sort of thing you're talking about.
Well,
if you look at there.
Yeah, you see, there's a secret language which initiates of this knowledge, this agenda, understand, and the rest of the population don't. To the rest of the population, oh, it's just a symbol, that's nice.
Yeah.
But it's actually a secret language, and as I point out in the book, the most obvious signature of this Illuminati, the illuminated ones, illuminated into knowledge and an understanding of history and science, etc., that the mainstream public are not allowed to know about, is the lighted torch. And funnily enough, this goes back to ancient stories of a hero, Prometheus. The Greek god is one example of him.
I'll come back to the lighted torch after news.
We're going to be talking to him.
Later on, we'll be talking to somebody who's
Talking Head. You're listening to some of 702's interview highlights from the past 7 days.
All right, David Icke, we're taking calls on 8830-702, specific as possible. Charles Bellevue, hello.
Hi. Thank you very much. Mr. Icke, you're on a trip, working trip to South Africa, getting a lot of publicity. You mentioned at the beginning of the show that if you were assassinated, it would give credence to your theories. My question is, why weren't you assassinated when these things first came out, if this all-powerful reptilian race didn't take you out then? And now, aren't you worried about coming to South Africa and a high publicity tour, things you've said about the Prophet Muhammad and the Quran? Aren't you worried that you'd become like a Salman Rushdie type figure, that you're subject to death threats? And
all right, good question.
Well, first of all, I couldn't care less, mate, to be absolutely truthful. This world is controlled by a four-letter word called fear. I'm afraid I let that go a long time ago. I speak my truth. People accept it, accept bits of it, or accept none of it. That's completely their right and their freedom to do so. What people think of me and what I say is none of my business. It's all theirs. I'm just putting out what I'm researching, stuff that I'm continually coming up with, and people will just have to take it or leave it. I'm not going to run away. Oh well, what's going to happen to me? Oh my, well, so much information that is there and people know about stays out of the public arena because people say, and I know because I meet them all the time, what will happen to me if I make this public? And I've just given up all that nonsense, and I just speak my truth, and people will just have to react as they want to. I don't know, I just get on with my life.
All right, Dennis, hello.
Hello.
Go for it.
Thank you. Welcome, first of all, to South Africa.
Joe, you don't have to say welcome or anything. Just your question, Dennis. The lines are full.
Okay.
Hello, Dennis.
I haven't read your book, but I certainly am going to buy it. I disagree with some of the things, but I agree with some.
Good.
My question is how close is your theory to that of Gary Allen, who was an American senator who came out to South Africa in the mid-'80s and propagated very much what you're saying, is that the whole world is controlled by the Rockefellers and
All right, Gary Allen.
Gary Allen wrote a book, I think it was 1972-73, called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. He followed it up with another one, as you indicate, called the Rockefeller File. And he uncovered in America what scores and scores of people, hundreds and hundreds of people, because it's just expanding now in America as people begin to see that what was perceived as a theory is actually in their face. And all these people are coming up with the same basic structure. Now, we can disagree, and we should, because this doesn't want to be uncovered, so therefore we're not going to have all the answers all the time. But the basic structure, that there is a elite that is sitting at the top of a pyramid structure in which most of the people in the pyramids of banking, the pyramids of politics, the pyramids of secret societies even, have no idea how those organizations and societies are actually being manipulated by a tiny few at the top of these pyramids.
Why hasn't nobody from the top come and said, this is it? There must be somebody, there must be a rebel somewhere, a renegade somewhere who can provide proof, not theory like you're providing.
Well, first of all, when you look at the interconnecting evidence, much of which is documented, there are areas where we're going into areas of speculation. Well, it's leading this way, we don't know yet. But the very heart of this is no theory. It's fundamentally provable.
No, but linkages and people with an agenda is one thing, all right? Business, whatever, the world is a global visit. But to link that to aliens who want to take over, who eat babies, which is what you say, I mean, that's where it gets all a little bit hazy. Based on the evidence of psychics who've seen things and heard things, because that's a lot of your evidence. You've got drawings of aliens. You claim these people shapeshift into alien form. That's where it gets ridiculous.
Right. I mean, it doesn't get ridiculous.
Have you ever seen an alien? Have you ever seen a lizard?
Hold on a second. It doesn't get ridiculous. It gets out of your belief system.
Right.
And the two are not necessarily the same,
Yeah, but
mate,
you have to
funnily
operate.
enough.
You have to operate within you. Out of most people, a shape-shifting people.
Right.
Bush turns into a lizard and eats babies.
Well,
Come
hold on a minute. You see, this is the point. It's now just gone 20 to 9.
Yeah.
I could actually answer the question that you have just posed over an hour and a half without pausing for breath. But let me ask you this question. See, I am guided and I follow information. I come from no preconceived idea. I'm almost at the point in my life, to be frank, I almost couldn't care less what's going on in the world. I just don't want to know what's going on.
Right.
So unless you come to this area of research with an open mind, where you let the information be your guide rather than preconceived idea or rigid belief system, you're never going to uncover what's going on, because your belief system starts editing anything that's taking you out of the belief system.
But that's what it's there for.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, that's what it's there for. That's why we're manipulated to have belief systems, so that we live in mental and emotional prisons and shut out information.
The
that's very
lizard.
relevant
Come to
to
the lizard. Where do you get the lizard? You claim in your book that there's. I can almost go with the bloodline, and I fully agree with you about the myths that have come together,
Sure.
the breeding of the people, etc., the elites that are out there, the business. I can go along with that.
Yeah.
Now, where do you get from there to people who have seen these people turning into lizards?
Right. Well, I'll do it as briefly as I can.
Yeah, very briefly.
And you say very briefly, but this is
All
a
right, go,
massive
Shish,
question.
go. All right, go.
What happened was that about a year ago, as I'm looking around and I'm getting to the point where this interbreeding stuff is becoming a common theme throughout the ancient legends and texts and accounts, I started coming across, in one 15-day period in America, traveling around America, I met 12 separate people in different walks of life. We're talking about bankers, we're talking about television presenters, we're talking about the whole range of society, different ages, different experiences, who told me the same story, that they had seen people in positions of power overwhelmingly, but not totally, always, turn into a lizard-like humanoid and then go back again. This
on television or live?
No, this is in front of their face. Some people saw it on television. Most people saw it actually in front of their face. And then I started to remember that I'd read a book back in the early 90s by a lady called Kathy O'Brien, who had written about her experiences as a mind-controlled robot, in effect, in a mind-control project called MK Ultra, Project Monarch in America. And I thought, I'm sure she mentioned, reptilian bloody people. So I went back, flicked through the index, thinking this is crazy, and there's like reptilians in the index. So I'll go back and I read the references, and she talks there about seeing George Bush, who she spent a lot of time with very closely, turn into a reptilian-like humanoid figure. And he said to her that they were an extraterrestrial race that had taken over the planet, and no one realized it because they looked human. She also tells the story in the book of working with Miguel de la Madrid, who was president of Mexico at the time, who told her the story of what he called the iguana race, which was an extraterrestrial race that had interbred with the ancient, what we now call Mexican people, the Maya and before, to create hybrid bloodlines. Now, this is a complete repeat of what the Sumerian tablets say on the other side of the world. And that this iguana race, which was the one that produced the world leaders, could take either a human or reptilian form.
The shape-shifting you talk about.
I then go back to the ancient world, and I think, well, crikey, if it's happening today, surely there must be references in the ancient world. There are endless. The ancient Indus Valley culture had gods they called the Nagas, and what they said about the Nagas is they could take human or reptilian form. I then come across, and this is a big source for the Diana part of the book, the Diana. I come across Diana's closest confidant on matters that she couldn't talk about to anyone else for 9 years before she died, a lady called Christine Fitzgerald. And she tells me all about the connections between Diana and the Windsors, and the way she was treated was horrific. And then in the middle of this conversation, she knows none of this research and this stuff happened to me. She said, "You know what Diana's name for the Windsors was?" And I knew the Windsors were one of these bloodlines by now. She said she used to call them the lizards or the reptiles. And she said she used to say, in all seriousness, she said, they're not human. And then I'm thinking, crikey. And then Christine Fitzgerald says, you know that the Windsors are a reptilian race. they're a hybrid race. And I'm thinking, crikey, not another. I then meet a lady through a scientist friend of mine in America who talks about the fact that she conducted rituals for the British royal family at places like Balmoral. And again, other sources have confirmed these blood rituals go on. And I go to her not to talk about shape-shifting reptiles, because at this point, John, I'm thinking, if this keeps coming into my life, I'm going to have to go public with this stuff eventually, and I don't really fancy this very much. And halfway through this conversation, well, she's telling me about the rituals and the human sacrifice. And incidentally, when you follow these bloodlines from the ancient world, Babylon, to now, human sacrifice follows them the whole way. And she said, but that's not the most amazing thing. So I'm sitting in the chair thinking, what could be more amazing than that? She said, at certain points in the ritual, she said, these people turn into reptiles. And I'm thinking, not another. I then talked to a lady in America who's head of Mothers Against Ritual Abuse. Not about reptiles, but about the abuse network, the ritual abuse network in America. And in this conversation, she says to me, and there's another strange thing she said. Again, I've not talked to her about any of the stuff she's coming up with. She's another strange thing she said. A number of my clients tell me that during the rituals, the participants turn into reptiles. Can you understand this? And only yesterday, I spent a couple of hours talking to Credo Mutwa.
Oh, yes.
And we had a couple of hours conversation, and we just talked about the ancient legends of Africa and the stories of the group or race that had manipulated Africa in the same period of thousands of years that I'm talking about in the Western world, if you like. And he starts talking about this race which he called the Chitawa, or something very close to them. Chituli. And about how that they had manipulated black Africa and continued to be in the positions of power today. And I said, well, what do these people look like? He said, well, I can show you, because he said, I've painted a picture based on descriptions, ancient and modern, of this race.
Reptiles.
So we get in the car, we go across, and I see this painting, and I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. It is an exact replica of the descriptions that all these different people are telling me they're seeing. It's an exact replica of the ancient descriptions of this reptilian race in the ancient world. Now, what I'm saying to you, John, is people can say, he's bloody mad. And I say to them, I'm just interested in what's going on, so explain this phenomena to me. Explain why all these different people, ancient and modern, all over the world, are having the same experience, and I'll take that book out of circulation. It's a little challenge. Let's have you.
All right. Barbara Benoni, another one there. Barbara, hi.
Yes, I'd like to know more about the theory concerning Diana being murdered.
All right, Diana's dead. I'm hurrying you here, Diana's death, because you say that was all part of it. She was killed for a specific reason. Why was she killed?
Well, she was killed for many reasons, but I've got 60 pages in the book, and one of the major sources is this closest confidant of her for 9 years.
Who just happens to have died.
She died not only... I mean, this is interesting. You know, we talked earlier about the symbolism.
Yeah.
Just take the symbolism of her death, first of all. These bloodlines in the ancient world, and still today, part of their ritual worships the ancient goddess Diana, who was supposed to be a moon goddess, symbolic of the moon. One of the key bloodlines in this story is called the Merovingians, or was one time called the Merovingians. They were the bloodline that actually created the city called Paris. They named it after one of the participants in the Trojan Wars, which they knew their bloodline had been involved in. They were massive goddess Diana worshippers, and they created, outside the original Paris, but very much inside the modern one, underground chambers where they did their rituals, including sacrifice to the goddess Diana. That point in Paris, where those rituals took place to the goddess Diana, is now another underground chamber. It's called the Pont d'Alma Tunnel, where Diana's car crashed. Actually, Pont d'Alma means bridge or passage of the moon goddess. When you look at the legends of the goddess Diana, three things keep reoccurring in the stories. First of all, tree groves, which was the sacred place of worship to the goddess Diana, islands and lakes. They've buried her on an island, in a tree grove, on a lake.
Why did they kill her then? You said they'd kill her. Why? And how? How do you arrange an accident like this?
Well, I mean, again...
It's there detail in the book, sure.
It's like 10 to 9, it's a big story.
Why?
But the other thing that I would point out, just get away from the symbolism to pure hard facts, it was just an accident. Well, there are 17 traffic cameras between the Ritz Hotel and the Pont d'Alma Tunnel. constantly, 24 hours a day, filming the road traffic movements on the route she took. What a coincidence that all 17 went down and ceased to operate in the period it took the Mercedes to get from the Ritz Hotel to the tunnel. The police frequencies in central Paris went down in the same period. And I've got a picture which I'll use in the talk in Johannesburg on Sunday of one of these traffic cameras. It actually looks down on the entrance to the Pont d'Alma tunnel. You would see exactly what happened. You would have seen the Mercedes come into the tunnel. You'd know if there was a Fiat Uno involved. You'd know if there was some guy on the back of it.
Why was she killed? Why?
Well, many reasons, but on the basic level. As she was increasingly showing, not least with a Panorama interview, which was only the major current affairs program in Britain, she was, and that was only stage one of revealing what the Windsors were really into. I know from Christine Fitzgerald and other people that I've talked to that she knew so much about the Windsors that was utterly, utterly horrific, and she was so angry at her own treatment that she was going to reveal this stuff, and she was searching around for the best way of doing it. She actually talked, if you remember, to journalists literally days before she died.
But hold on,
about
why is she not a lizard? If she's part of the bloodline, they're married, they're all interconnected, she's connected, why is she not a lizard? Why didn't Charles marry a lizard?
Well, the thing is that, again, we've got to get into a bigger picture here. There is a difference between the consciousness that is animating the physical body and the physical body itself. So yeah, the Diana bloodline, the Spencers, is an ancient aristocratic bloodline, which is constantly interbred, and that's why the Windsors wanted her for that reason. She used to call herself, to Christine Fitzgerald, the Windsor brood mare. She knew that they'd actually pulled her into the scene just because they wanted Charles to interbreed with her or whatever to create the next generation, because it's all about genetics to these people for a very good reason the book explains. But you know, a consciousness that is not of that state of mind can also become incarnate in these bloodlines and become, if you like, cuckoos in the nest. And there have been a number of these people. And what Diana was becoming, especially as she emerged through her experience from being a shy, diffident person into this very strong, powerful, and I tell you, very angry woman, she was becoming a massive cuckoo in the nest who was threatening to expose a great deal that would have shocked people. Now, I can sit here talking to you about this stuff, but if Lady Diana had called a press conference and talked about this stuff, okay, a lot of people would have called her mad, because she knew this stuff, you see. They would have called her mad, yes, but this would have gone into every newspaper in the world. And she was taken out at a time that was when she was preparing to start to talk in a way she never had before about these people.
What about JFK Jr.?
Don't know. I won't talk about things I haven't researched.
JFK?
JFK was another example of literally, because as the book explains, Diana wasn't just murdered; it was actually a ritual killing. So was JFK, and again, we talked earlier about the lighted torch being a key signature, which initiates understand. Just look at the lighted torch in relation to the two people we're talking about. First of all, after they killed JFK in Dealey Plaza, the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry actually put up, just down from the grassy knoll where it happened, an obelisk, and on the top of the obelisk was a lighted torch. On Kennedy's grave, from that day to this, they put a lighted torch. The point where people take their tributes to Diana in Paris is actually on top of the Pont d'Alma tunnel, and it is a massive depiction of a lighted torch. On her grave island in the Althorpe estate in Northamptonshire, the Spencer estate, is a depiction of a lighted torch. And again, when you look at where the Statue of Liberty came from, the lighted torch, it actually comes from French Freemasons. They're the ones that gave it to New York. There's an almost exact mirror replica of the Statue of Liberty on an island in the River Seine, a very short walk from the Pont d'Alma tunnel.
One of the most fascinating parts of the book is when you look at architecture, and when you look at London, when you look at, and there's, you know, you're going to look at the spine in Johannesburg, down there, and you'd also maybe find a couple of, even me, and I don't go along with a lot of what you say. What happens next? What happens now? What must people look for if they want sort of proof of what you're saying?
Well,
make some predictions.
First of all, if people want, more, if you like, confirmation and proof, beyond what's in the books, well, maybe they could lift their rear end from the chair they're currently sitting on and actually go out and look for it. I mean, that would be a good start, you know, because it's there to be found if you only want to look for it, and you look for it with an open mind rather than a belief system you have to defend. But what we're going to see, and you know, you look back at some of my previous books, like And the Truth Shall Set You Free and The Robot's Rebellion, some of the things they talked about, and this is not prophecy, this is just knowledge of what the agenda is.
Sure.
It's happening in our face now. We're going to see more incidents, for instance, around the world where people go crazy with guns, and
this is because they're mind controlled. I mean, these are people who've gone slightly bonkers.
This is
see that today in the paper.
What's this?
The guy in an axe in America.
Oh well, I mean, this is
bonkers, crazed look in his face, was killed.
Well, I didn't even know about this story, but what the?
Because you claim these are mind controlled stooges who do these daft things.
Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
The
We've got a minute. A minute,
right. The Center of Global Mind Control is an organization in London called the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. It was created by a guy called Dr. John Rawlings Rees out of the British military's Psychological Warfare Department. One asset, or robot, if you like, of Tavistock was a man called Thomas Hamilton. Just happened to be the guy who went crazy with a gun in a school gymnasium in Dunblane, which has led to legislation which has taken guns out of circulation in large numbers in Britain. Now, I'm not into guns. I don't use guns. I'm not interested in guns. But we have to, if we're going to get streetwise, we have to ask the question, why do we have this pattern all over the world? And I've been in 22 countries in the last 2 years, so I see the global pattern. Where people have gone crazy with guns, and immediately legislation has followed to take guns out of circulation. Why was it that Adolf Hitler introduced gun legislation of this kind just before he started filling concentration camps? But let me just give you that final example of this. In just not long after Dunblane, a guy in Port Arthur, Tasmania, called Martin Bryant went crazy with a gun. He killed about 35 people. This has led to legislation which has basically taken guns out of circulation in Australia. It just so happens that Martin Bryant was given psychological treatment in the 1980s, and his future treatment decided by a guy called Dr. Eric Cunningham Dax. He just happens to be the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations Australian representative and a close associate of John Rawlings Rees, the creator of Tavistock, for decades. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. It's just a theory. We could all go back to sleep
Dave,
now. Good morning.
You're talking at various places. If you want to hear more, give us a number.
Okay.
Or you can get it at CompuTicket.
That's right. I'm in Johannesburg, the Technicon Conference Centre, Ormonde on Sunday. I'm talking from 10 in the morning till 6 at night. Massively illustrated all the way through, and it's CompuTicket, and the number to ring if you want more information is Rosie Howell, 021-683-1633, 021-683-1633. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Manchester United won't do it again this year, though.
You're looking just a little bit like an alien. You're looking like a lizard. You've turned into a lizard. My God. Make up your own mind. 2 to 9.
At least I have to turn.
We're going to be talking to
we're talking to later on. We'll be talking to somebody who's talking.
Talking Head. It's the talk of the week.